Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to be presenting at Kindred Sustainable Gambling Conference 2021. My name is Mark Potter and I'm Head of Delivery Epic Risk Management. And we're delighted to support Kindred as we have done over the last 3 or 4 years as their leaders in the space of harm prevention. And I guess the point of this conversation is why is lived experience so important? And I hope the next 20 minutes or so will help you guys better understand why for us, we believe it's vital and is fundamental in everything we do at Epic Risk Management. I'm going to start by playing a video, which I hope will sort of introduce you guys to who we are, what we do and why we do it.
Our motto is very simple. It's to take the problem out of gambling. We know that what we're doing saves lives, and that's why we do it. Epic was formed in 2013 in an open prison after I'd suffered a 10-year pathological gambling disorder in which I transacted just short of £5 million, lost over £1 million, and it ended in a suicide attempt and a prison sentence. I'd stolen £434,000 from the bank that I worked for. I had two options really. Do you go out and get a job, or do you go out there and actually make a difference to people's lives? And do you actually try and use your experience to stop people getting to the same place that you've got?
I lost my last quid, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I knew I was in trouble then because I had a significant amount of debt to pay off and I'd essentially stolen £8 off my boss.
I think the really frightening side of this all happened without my wife knowing, without my family knowing, without my friends knowing.
I'd borrowed money off 113 different individual people and I had £497,000 worth of debt.
How do you educate people? How do you prevent gambling-related harm?
It's a cliche, I know, but if I can help one person, then it will be worth it.
Look, I think when it comes to safer gambling or sustainable gambling, I think getting the balance right is really difficult. Because in addition to your guys' social responsibility and legal obligations, there's also a commercial long-term business sustainability perspective. So I guess the balance needs to be addressed head on in order to be a successful business. And I think for us, look, we absolutely recognise that gambling's recognised as a leisure activity enjoyed on a regular basis by millions of people around the world and done in a responsible way. However, what we see is that gambling can have a negative impact on the lives of a small percentage of people. And that's why we believe that the use of lived experience is so important. When you look at the statistics, approximately 1.2 million adults are at a low risk of problem gambling, 550,000 adults classed as having a moderate risk, 24 million adults gambled across 2018 and 19, and approximately 340,000 of them are already problem gamblers. And I guess when you look at what is problem gambling, it's gambling that disrupts or damages personal, family or recreational pursuits. And we think that our team's lived experience allows those we train to better understand who, how and why this occurs and why vulnerability occurs and how that often then leads into problem gambling. And look, it's not only the individual that this affects, because what we see is that problem gambling affects up to 10 other people for every one problem gambler. So if you take those 340,000 and times it by 10, there's a significant amount of people across the UK, and that correlates across Europe and the rest of the world that we need to protect. And look, I think what better way to highlight the use of lived experience than taking you through a short journey of my own experiences. As I said, my name is Mark Potter. I'm now Head of Delivery at Epic Risk Management, and I love doing what I do, but it's fair to say that wasn't always the dream. The dream for me was to play professional sport, and I had that opportunity when I left school at 18 to go into a sports environment with the world at my feet And I guess gambling at that point had never been something that was on the radar. Short of a £1 bet a week on the national lottery, I had no experience of it. Now, going into a full-time sports environment, that, as you can imagine, changed. And a few other guys like sort of going to the casino, and they had stakes in racehorses. And I joined the gambling club because I wanted to fit in as part of the team bonding. And that was on a Thursday afternoon, £20 a week. And we pooled it together and sort of had low-level bets on horses and sports. And I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it. And for me, rugby at that period of time was going really well. I broke into the first grade team within the first year. I stayed in the team as part of the second year, got a contract extension, and everything went according to plan until this happened. And I guess for anyone who's involved in sport for any level will understand that injuries are really, I guess, probably the worst part of being a sportsman. And that was the first sort of sign of my vulnerability, I guess, because very quickly I became bored. I was looking for things to occupy my time. And I guess I wasn't getting what I needed out of sport, which was the ups and downs and the adrenaline of winning and losing. And very quickly I found gambling replicated that. And 6 months into a very low level gambling journey, I had a significant win. And what I found from the day that I won 14 grand from a £50 bet, that changed the way I gambled forever, because the excitement, the buzz and the adrenaline of how good that felt was something that I always wanted to replicate. And very early in the journey, it was fine because I was playing with winnings. It wasn't my money. I didn't see any risk to that. But what it did was the next 6 months playing with those winnings got me used to a level of play that would ultimately be unsustainable when I had to go back to starting using my own money. And 6 months later, that happened. And then what I found is I found it really difficult to go back to a low level of play that I was used to previously. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't think you'd ever get the same sort of level of a buzz, adrenaline, excitement placing low level bets than what I was used to. And I then started to put more money than I could afford into my account because I still wanted to gamble large amounts of money on horses and sports. And that subsequently left me without money for the last couple of weeks of the month. And then I started to use credit to try and win my way out of debt and ultimately chase my losses. And that was, I guess, the timeline of what started me on the journey to problem gambling. From there, I then grew up and got married and had kids, and it was every intention that I would stop doing what I was doing at that point. But I guess because I was so used to gambling every day at that stage and spending high levels of money, I found it really difficult to stop. And I started to gamble again when I was married with kids at a low level at first. It was my intention to sort of do it, which would be non-problematic. But as you can imagine, that very quickly subsided, and I won €900 from a football acca bet 3 or 4 weeks into my journey again, and that was it. I was back up and running. I started to do the same things. I started to lie to my wife. I started to not spend time with my children, and ultimately, sort of 2 or 3 years down the line, I was doing things that I never thought I was capable of doing. I was sort of paying the postman €200 a month to not put mail through my door. I was pulling the house phone call slightly out of the wall, so my wife wouldn't have to answer phone calls for people looking for money. And I essentially took all of the money out of our savings account to top up my gambling account, and that meant that we didn't pay our mortgage, and that meant that a bailiff ended up coming to our door looking for the money we owed. And nobody knew anything about this at the time. It was all done in complete secret. And the only way I knew how to get out of my problems was to try and win it, because it's all I was ever used to. And I think gambling, more than anything else, keeps you going for a long period of time, because I always thought I could win my way out of debt, and I always thought I could solve my problems by another big win. And the experiences I'd had, I knew how to win. I'd won 14 grand at 19 years of age. 6 months previous to my bailiff letter, I won €98,000 on a Monday afternoon on the horses. 24 hours later, it was down to zero. And because of those experiences, I just always thought I could win my way out of trouble. And it didn't happen. And I ended up going to my boss at my rugby club and asking him to lend me some money. And he was such a nice guy that he lent me some money that day, to which I tried to win my way out of debt, and it didn't work. And I subsequently ended up stealing a further €8,000 from him. And he was a lovely guy. It was never my intention to steal the money from him, but I was in such a desperate situation that I thought it was my best way of winning my way out of debt. I didn't pay off all of that mortgage that I owed. I tried to win more with that money, subsequently got myself into further debt, and I ended up being arrested and charged with theft and fraud and forgery and having a court case to my name. And when I look back on those years that I was doing what I was doing, I think some of the more important things over and above the money I was spending was, look, I had a dream career. I'm doing a job that I loved. The reality of that is, for the 13 seasons that I played full-time professional rugby, I only enjoyed about 2 of them. The rest was just a means to an end of getting paid and topping up my betting account to try and win my way out of debt or solve all my problems. And that's a sad thing to have to look back on. Even more sad, I guess, is the fact that I didn't spend any time with my wife or kids when they were growing up. I lied to them constantly. And I did things that would put our home and our lives in jeopardy through my gambling, and not fully understanding what my relationship with gambling was. And that culminated in a court case. And as it turned out, I think, look, the rugby and the family life just took a backseat to this. And the day I turned up in court, fully expecting to go to prison for a fraud, I was asked to provide proof of my betting statements. And I never knew how much I'd staked or gambled or lost in sort of the last period of time that I was gambling. But I got 12-month statements leading up to the day that I got arrested. And when I was sat there with my dad waiting for sentencing, he asked me how much I thought I'd lost. I said, I don't know, Dad. I said, but I think you need to prepare for it to be quite a lot. And I thought I'd lost about 150 grand in the last 12 months. And as it turned out, the 12 months leading up to the day of my arrest, I'd transacted 14,129 individual bets. I'd staked £1.47 million. I'd lost £192,000, and I'd been given £112,000 in free bets by VIP schemes. And I managed to do all of that on a £72,000 salary. And I genuinely believe that kept me out of prison, because even I was shocked at that level of playing stake, and the judge couldn't believe how it was humanly possible for somebody earning that kind of money to spend that kind of money. And look, I was lying to everybody. I was using credit cards, I was using loans, I was using borrowed and stolen funds, and all of the funds that I earned. And that's where I got to. And I ended up with a 3-year suspended sentence and 200 hours community service. Now, most people would think that would be the end of somebody's gambling journey, but for me, it wasn't. Even though I knew all of the things that I was doing was wrong, I then went on to sell my wife's engagement ring and all of my kids' toys about 6 months later. And after a failed suicide attempt at a train station, that was the realization that what I was doing wasn't right and needed to change, because I didn't think anybody or anything could get any worse than selling your kids things and possessions to put money on horses. And I think that's probably the saddest thing I had to go through, is I had to go to treatment to better understand who I was, what my relationship with gambling was, and get counselling and psychotherapy to be able to work my way through that. And look, that was great for me. And one of the biggest things that I found is I learned about the reasons why I, as an individual, did what I did. And when I looked into it, and me as a professional athlete, when you look at what vulnerability is for that demographic, look, I thought I knew everything about sports. I thought I knew, because I played it, I would know who was going to win games, and I used that to my advantage. I then got injured, and I wasn't getting what I needed out of sport, which was the ups and downs, the adrenaline, the winning and losing, and the spending time with your teammates. When I was injured and away from that, I was looking for things to fill that void, and I used gambling as part of that. And then I won sort of 14 grand as a 19-year-old kid. I didn't have any idea what the risks were. I thought I could go ahead and spend the winnings without any comeback. And ultimately that led me down the path to getting to the point where I was stealing money from my boss, and I was attempting to sort of end my life. And that sort of led me to get to my understanding of what my relationship with gambling was. And I think when we work with operators, when we deliver education sessions, the use of our lived experience and our journeys helps form the why this is so important. It also allows people to understand who can become vulnerable, and at what points across a customer journey, I guess, do things start to change. And if you look at the main drivers for gambling, one of the main things should be done for fun and enjoyment. Now, for all of your guys' customer bases, that should always be the case. But when things start to change and it starts to become about something else, as it did for me, that's when we need to better understand what harm exists. And I think we created a gambling spectrum, which was created by using our first-hand knowledge of gambling addiction, and it reflects the various stages of gambling, right from the day you place your first bet through to being a disordered or pathological gambler. And I think the use of our stories throughout this sort of helps bring that to life. And when we look at what the risks of gambling are, I think, look, for people that don't gamble and don't spend any time doing it, it's no risk. I think the most important thing about that point is to understand that for somebody to never have a problem with gambling, they need to be in control of the time, the money, and the mental headspace. It's just when things start to change and one or more of them starts to change, then things start to become more of a problem. For operators, I guess the safest place to have your customer base is in the green zone, where people are gambling quite regularly, but in a very controlled manner within their disposable income limits. And if you do that, then the rest of it is pretty low risk, because there won't be many, I guess, escalations in spends. Guys will withdraw the winnings when they win anything. They won't be chasing losses. They will stick to the markets and products that appeal to them, and they will use consistent sources of depositing, and they won't be the ones coming to operators begging for bonuses or making complaints. Now, when you start to move down that spectrum and your reasons for gambling change, as they did for me, and when I look back at my journey, I started off gambling for fun and enjoyment like everybody else. As soon as I won my 14 grand, it became about replicating the buzz and the adrenaline of how good that felt. And then very quickly after that, when I was chasing my loss, I did my behaviours from friends, family, and teammates. It was about using gambling for a means of escapism, to not have to deal with all of the negative things that were going on for me lifestyle wise. And I think when we train, when we educate, when we deliver consultancy services, the lived experience part of that and the stories that we tell, I guess, complement the training methodology that we use. And I think that's really important. And to be able to have somebody in the room to answer questions from a real life perspective, and from a perspective of somebody that's been on the other end, I guess, of the online computer, because it's so difficult as an online operator to have empathy for a computer screen and some numbers. If you have one of those guys stood in front of you talking about their experiences and how things change, and how I guess they would have been receptive to interactions at certain points across a journey, and what would have worked for them, and I guess at what point that became too much and what point they needed third-party help and support, then I guess I hope you will be able to see the use of lived experience is so important. Now, I think here at Epic Risk Management, we have now 12 guys in a very similar position to me. We've probably put £50 million worth of bets through various online operators and retail operators. We've now got 40 plus years of recovery. So I guess that gives us a level of authenticity and experience that you don't often get. And combining that with fit for purpose training and fit for purpose safer gambling sort of practices, I think it's a really important point to make. So look, I'm here for the next sort of 5 or 10 minutes. I would love to answer any questions anybody may have. I'm more than happy to provide my contact details for anybody that wants to chat further. And yeah, so fire away, please ask whatever you like to do. So thank you for your time, and great to be able to contribute to this great conference. Thank you.